First, a little bit of history. In 1893, Joseph Mayer Rice went around the country looking for good schools. His goal was to find the 19th century version of best practices, so that the schools he identified as bad could apply those best practices and become good schools. His was, to borrow a phrase from John Dewey, the quest for certainty. I submit to you today that we find ourselves caught up in a conversation that is symbolic of, infused with, and subsumed by the quest for certainty. No Child Left Behind is simply the latest and most sweeping initiative to further the agenda of certainty. From the Committee of 10 in the 19th century to A Nation at Risk and Goals 2000 in the 20th century, I submit to you that there isn't much that's new. Each and every one of these initiatives starts with the assumption that Joseph Mayer Rice was essentially correct in searching for the holy grail of schooling. What works, best practices, accountability, and effective methods of instruction each convey and collectively instantiate the ideology of certainty. So instead of railing against No Child Left Behind, I'd like to take a cue from history. If the history of the United States education policy is any indication of the success of our country, I think we need to do more. Specifically, I think we need to, this is it, get ready, we need to expand No Child Left Behind. I think we need to expand No Child Left Behind because we need more reports, we need more paperwork, we need to be more accountable. The more paperwork one has to do means that the job being done is most important. As a result, of course, we need to expand standardized testing. Instead of 3, 5, and 7 grades, let's really get down to brass tacks and show just how accountable schools can be. Test every year? No. Not good enough. I'm submitting that we test monthly or even weekly. The reason that I'm arguing for this expansion, as you might have already presumed, so that I could get out of here alive, is that until you are able to take the quest for certainty that is embodied by No Child Left Behind and take it to its nth degree or fullest extent, you will not change the mindset of most individuals in the United States regarding the very persuasive and very lilting, romantic sort of language, if you will, of the business community. Accountability is what everyone wants to have on the tip of their tongue. So if they want accountability, let's give it to them. And let's give it to them in spades so that teachers will be so overworked that they will not be able to teach any actual content. Let's give them the kind of information that they're going to need to extend not only the quest for certainty, but what I'm calling consumer materialism. That is, the business's influence on schools that reduces teaching and learning to merely procedural consumeristic expectations. Why has current society bought into the emphasis on standardized tests, ITBS, CAT, international comparisons, Nickel-B, grade point averages, corporate modeled hierarchies, and this thing that we're calling classroom management skills? I actually wrote an article once called An Argument for the Deletion of the Word Skills from the English Language. And the effort was to try and get individuals to stop talking about life skills and learning skills and reading skills and focus on life, learning, and reading. I'm going to consider then 4 reasons today regarding this question about why business-promoted basics are so influential in school. And I'll be quick so that we can then have argument or conversation. For the first, these are the 4. The quest for certainty, which I've already touched on, I'll go into more detail. Second, sequential reasoning. Third, learning as knowing. And 4, preparation for future life, my most famous phrase. For one, there exists in American society a nagging desire for certitude. As though there are structural plateaus of attainment, we fixate on completed tasks, rarely recognizing that completion is at best temporal. That is, as soon as one task is completed, there will always, I submit, be something else to consider or labor over. Home maintenance is my favorite parallel example. The American dream is to buy a house so that you can arrive. But when you get the house, what then do you have to do? You got to paint it, you got to replace the windows, or at least you've got to vacuum it, or you've got to clean up, the dog mat, whatever. The point is, the attainment notion, I think, is more fleeting than most would think. Still, society attributes to No Child Left Behind and ITBS scores the kind of certitude that results in claims such as students aren't learning what they need to know. So what we need to do then is standardize the curriculum in such a way as to de-skill teachers so much that they actually don't have to be thinking individuals. We do the thinking for them, lay out the 17 steps that they need to cover, don't give them enough time to cover it, by the way, and test them every other day. The link to 2 above is between the expectation of certainty, a diploma equals X, that is, I'm going to prepare you for a job if you take these 17 courses, and how society ensures that certainty. Break learning into its most basic componential parts and structure separated information in the form of a linear equation. The alphabet is before words, words before sentences, sentences before paragraphs. You get the linearity, right? Students can learn this way, but many students do not learn this way. Still, because society is in search of scientific models, certainty, for learning, most students, most of the time, in most schools, are subjected to such routines. Additionally, when this linear sequential process is finished, learning is claimed to have occurred and is equated with knowledge. This is 3 from above. A student can claim to have learned, for example, a Shakespearean soliloquy or Kwanzaa precept. She recites, I do much wonder that one man sing how much another man is a fool, and he dedicates his behavior to the course of love, will if he lapses such shallow folly become the art of his own scorn, such a man as Claudio, ... right? Now that's a round of applause right there. Come on, people. Come on. She has learned, right? But she does not know, I submit to you, until she explains the sentiment, interprets the terminology, and makes meaning of the passage. Other recitations can be inserted here, as can memorization of multiplication tables that my mathematics colleagues sometimes seem to think is a necessary precondition for understanding multiplication. Not true. They're used so often as pieces of the preparation puzzle that most schools currently represent this sort of ideology. And this is the sort of preparation for life notion. That's from 4 from above, which I want to suggest to you today is the hallmark of America's expectation for its schools. It's become preparation for future life as the phrase that's used and so deeply ingrained as the purpose of schooling that the other 3 concerns have such wide appeal and are demonstrated as much as they are. That is, the idea that you go to school and you don't have to really understand or critique what the actual aims of education might be. We don't have to debate that because it's already so given, it's already so deeply understood that the reason to go to school is to learn, what's the word? The skills that you need to have when you get out of school so that you can get what? A job. And so the skills have some sort of direct correlation to job preparation. This is what Dewey meant when, as noted earlier, he claimed that there was no end beyond itself. I'm going to argue a Deweyan point here, right? When he notes that schooling is its own end, something that most individuals I don't think would particularly readily agree with, but nonetheless I'm going to try and put forward Dewey's claim. He wants to debunk the myth that schools are places where students learn the necessary skills to compete in the future world. Dewey's point was that there is no preparation for future life, right? There's only living now. So if in fact what you're doing in English is worthy, then that's going to be worthy in your life as it is, and if there's value to be taken forward from there, it's going to occur naturally. It's not something that because it's been expected of you for a particular month that somehow all of a sudden once you pass the exam or memorize the passage or know the authors or what have you, that you're then able to somehow transfer that into dressing up and going for a job interview, although that tends to be the way that it is equated. If they are to know anything, and this is the epistemological dilemma, by the way, because if we mistake, and the state of Georgia does this all the time, they equate knowledge with successful test scores, that is, or higher test scores, right? But in philosophy, the notion of epistemology requires much more than your being able to correctly fill in the bubble for an answer. That is, you've got to provide, in traditional epistemology, which we can debunk at another conference or at another time, later this afternoon if you'd like to join me back in Midtown, that's sort of beside the point for the moment. I can use the traditional syllogism and still get my point across, I think, which is to say, in order to know something, according to the traditionalists, you have to make a claim that something is the case, and you've got to have 3 conditions that are necessary and sufficient. One is truth, right? I know that something is the case, and what I say is the case has to be true. I have to be able to believe it, and I have to be able to justify it. Now, in epistemology, if you have just the first 2 of those, you're called a reliabilist. You have a reliable belief-making mechanism, so you're able to make the claim that something is true, and you don't have to justify it. Carl Guinet's clairvoyant weather forecaster is the classic example. There's a weather forecaster who knows that in Sydney, Australia, what the temperature is all the time. No access to the internet, no other sort of a way to get the information. Just clairvoyantly knows this information. There's no justification that's required, in other words. So the clairvoyant weather forecaster, you could say, knows, right? It's the same thing like at the horse race, right? You don't have to have the justification, you just have to know. And as long as you get it right all the time, then in retrospect, you can be able to say of the person, they know that the weather in Sydney or that whatever the horse's name is going to be able to win. And you're going to give some validity to that. But if you extend that beyond reliabilism, you're going to have to provide justification or warrant or some sort of explanation in order to convince me or you that I or you actually know something. This is in many ways the major feature that's missing from most standardized exams. So you have a kind of reliabilism that presumes to be knowledge, but it isn't actually knowledge on a traditional or other kind of explanation. Did you expect a lecture on epistemology, by the way? That was not quite in the cards.
Does anybody expect a lecture?
Nobody expects a lecture on epistemology. So let me just go ahead and sort of conclude here or wrap up that if in fact you're serious about dismantling No Child Left Behind, I'm sort of tongue-in-cheek, but I'm not really tongue-in-cheek when I say I think you're going to have to press it to its margin. I think you're going to have parents, not just some parents, but lots of parents concerned about their child's stress. You're going to need to have individuals so upset about the memo that goes home about eating red grapes and having the 17 hours of sleep or whatever that you have to have before, that they have to understand the absurdity of the practice that they're already participating in. Does this make sense? Yes. How are you going to do that? I'm done, and that's my question to you. Thank you very much.